My name is Elise Morgan, and I am 32 years old. All my life I tried to be the perfect daughter, the reliable one, the one who never caused trouble or asked for anything. That is until that Sunday dinner, when my family elders casually laughed and announced my younger sibling would just stay at my condo for a while. I stood up, hands trembling, and said, "Funny, I have not lived there for 6 weeks." The room fell silent. My mother's voice cracked as she asked, "Wait then, where exactly have you been staying?" Before I tell you how my family fell apart that night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and subscribe to hear what happened when my family finally realized they never really knew me at all. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. From the time I could tie my own boots, my family elders expected me to handle things on my own. My younger sibling, Natalie Reed, on the other hand, was 3 years younger and treated like she was made of glass. When she cried, my family elders rushed to comfort her. When I cried, I was told to be strong and set a good example. "Elise Morgan can handle it" became my family elders' favorite phrase. School project, Elise Morgan can handle it. College applications, Elise Morgan can handle it. Finding an apartment and establishing a career with no financial help, Elise Morgan can handle it. And I did handle it. I worked through college while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. I secured an entry-level position at a prestigious marketing firm in Minneapolis and slowly worked my way up over 7 years. I found a small but nice one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park that I could just barely afford if I was careful with my budget. It was mine, earned through countless overtime hours and sacrificed weekends. Every month when I paid rent, I felt a mixture of pride and resentment. Pride because I had done this completely on my own. Resentment because my younger sibling had lived at apartment until she was 26 with my family elders covering her bills while she found herself. They even helped with the down payment on her condo when she finally moved out last year. "Your younger sibling is more sensitive than you," my mother would say whenever I pointed out the disparity. "You have always been so independent, Elise Morgan." Independent wasn't a choice. It was an expectation placed on me since childhood, a role I had to fill because no one offered me another option. 6 weeks ago, everything changed. Our company lost a major client and layoffs were announced. Despite my years of dedication and consistent performance reviews, I was among the first to go. Last in, first out, they said, even though that wasn't true in my case. The truth was that I didn't have the personal connections that others had cultivated while I was working late. I received 2 weeks of severance pay. It covered exactly 1 rent payment and some groceries. I immediately began applying for jobs, certain that with my experience I would find something quickly. I was wrong. The market was saturated with marketing professionals from various companies that had also downsized. Each day brought more rejection emails, or worse, silence. My savings, which had never been substantial, dwindled rapidly. When the first of the month came around and I couldn't make rent, I had to make a choice. I could tell my family and ask for help, or I could handle it on my own, as I always had. Pride won out. I packed what I could fit into my Honda Civic, gave notice to my landlord, and prepared to live in my car until I found another job. It will just be for a week or 2, I told myself as I organized the trunk to make room for my clothes and toiletries. No one needs to know. I kept my gym membership active so I would have a condo to shower. I found safe parking spots to sleep in. I maintained my appearance meticulously, making sure no one could tell that I was homeless. I set up a virtual mailbox service for job applications. I used library computers to send resumes and take online interviews. And every Sunday, I drove to my family elder's house in the suburbs for dinner, just as I had done for years. I arrived well-dressed with stories about work and friends that were entirely fabricated. I listened to my family elders praise Natalie Reed for her latest minor accomplishment. I smiled and played my part. The dinners became both a lifeline and a source of growing resentment. They provided me with a good meal and a few hours in a real apartment once a week. But each time I became more angry at how oblivious my family was to my struggle. Not once did they ask how I was really doing. Not once did they notice the dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Not once did they question why I always arrived exactly on time for dinner and left promptly after dessert. 6 Sundays passed this way. 6 dinners, where I smiled through gritted teeth as my mother asked Natalie Reed detailed questions about her life, while only asking me how's work before moving on without waiting for a real answer. 6 evenings of my father patting Natalie Reed on the shoulder proudly while barely acknowledging my presence. The resentment built inside me like pressure in a sealed container. Each dismissal, each moment of preferential treatment toward my younger sibling, each casual assumption that I was fine because I was always fine, added to it. I began to wonder if they would even notice if I stopped coming to dinner altogether. Would they call to check on me, or would they just shrug and say, "That's Elise Morgan, always independent"? The worst part was knowing that if I told them the truth, their response would likely be disappointment rather than support. My mother would sigh dramatically and say something about how she thought I was more responsible than this. My father would offer reluctant financial help accompanied by a lecture about proper planning. Natalie Reed would look at me with pity, her expression saying, "I never thought you would fail." The smell of detergent mixed with stale coffee, like an unwelcome ghost, hit Elise Morgan as she drifted into a memory. Sunday mornings in her childhood apartment. The brisk footsteps of her mother down the hallway, the loud scrape of toast in the kitchen, and her younger sibling Natalie Reed's soft voice humming along with the radio. Back then, Elise Morgan felt like a shadow, essential yet invisible. The familiar clutter of apartment clashed with the chill of her car, a reminder of the comforts she once took for granted. She longed for the smiles and cozy chaos she had secretly resented, aching for emotional recognition that never came. Did her family even see her? Or was she destined to be the dependable one, always there but never truly acknowledged? So, life went on. She slept in parking lots and washed her hair in gym sinks, masking her struggles behind a well-crafted facade during those Sunday dinners. Each week, she replayed her part. The proud, older, younger sibling, the one who always managed it all. But inside, she felt herself cracking. The Elise Morgan who had built her identity on being strong was slowly crumbling under reality's weight. No one in her family suspected her turmoil. Surely they would have noticed the growing distance, but they continued to see only what they wanted to see. That Sunday began like any other, a routine steeped in survival. The sun peeked through her car's window, nudging her awake at 5:30 a.m. It had been a restless night in a parking lot. Not much comfort there. She folded her blanket with precise care. It lay beneath the passenger seat like a bitter reminder of the comfort she'd lost. By 6 a.m., she was first in line at the gym, going through the motions, showering and dressing to perfection, even after a night spent in her seat. She was a warrior in disguise, fighting the daily battle of job applications with her laptop in a nearby coffee shop, each rejection cutting deeper. By 3 p.m., it was time to prepare for dinner at her family's apartment. In a public restroom, she slipped into a dark blue dress, one her mother adored. With a twinge of regret, she bought daisies, not because she wanted to, but because arriving empty-handed felt like admitting defeat. The drive to the suburbs was a familiar ritual of anticipation and dread. Arriving promptly at 5 p.m., she could feel the familiar knot tightening in her stomach. The unspoken expectations loomed large. Would they even notice the facade she wore like a mask? Would they care enough to see beyond the performance she had perfected? Each dinner turned into an emotional balancing act, her family oblivious to her silent screams for recognition and respect. As they praised Natalie Reed, every word felt like a dagger. The pressure built up inside her, threatening to burst through the carefully constructed wall she had erected. Each acknowledgement of Natalie Reed's accomplishments, each casual assumption that Elise Morgan was just fine, added fuel to her smoldering resentment. How much longer could she pretend? Would they notice if she stopped coming entirely? Or would they simply shrug and say, "That's Elise Morgan, always independent"? The truth felt too heavy to share. They would likely respond with disappointment rather than understanding. What if her mother sighed dramatically, claiming she thought Elise Morgan was stronger? The emotional weight was a silent battle, one not even Natalie Reed, a younger sibling wrapped in the comforts of their family's expectations, could grasp. Each Sunday felt like a stage, with Elise Morgan performing an act that wore her thin, and inside, she was a stranger to even herself. How many more charades could she endure before her heart gave in? How much longer until the facade crumbled completely? Not late enough to be criticized for delaying dinner. My mother answered the door with flour on her apron. "Oh, you're here," she said as if my consistent punctuality was surprising. "Natalie Reed just called." "She's running 15 minutes late." Of course she was, and of course it was fine. If I had been 15 minutes late, there would have been passive-aggressive comments throughout dinner about consideration for others' time. "I made lasagna," my mother continued as I followed her to the kitchen. Natalie Reed's favorite. It had been Natalie Reed's favorite for 30 years. Just once I wished my mother would make my favorite meal, but she probably didn't even know what it was. For the record, it's chicken pot pie with extra thyme. My father was in the living room watching a football game. He grunted a greeting without looking away from the screen. I placed the daisies on the coffee table near him. "Those for your mother?" he asked, finally glancing at me. "Yes," I replied, though they had been for both of them. "Nice," he said, attention already back on the game. I went to the kitchen to help my mother as I always did. She handed me plates to set the table, talking the entire time about Natalie Reed's latest achievement, a small promotion at the clothing boutique where she worked. "Assistant manager now," my mother said proudly, "and they're giving her business cards, real business cards with her name on them." I nodded and smiled, not mentioning that I had had business cards for years at my previous job, or that assistant manager at a boutique was hardly comparable to my former position as marketing strategist for national campaigns. But those comparisons weren't fair, I reminded myself. Natalie Reed was doing her best. It wasn't her fault our family elders had different standards for us. The doorbell rang at 5:20 and my mother rushed to answer it, abandoning the salad she'd been asking me to help with. I heard Natalie Reed's voice animated and loud, followed by my father's enthusiastic greeting. By the time they entered the kitchen, the three of them were laughing about something. Elise Morgan Zoe said, giving me a quick hug, "You look nice. That dress brings out your eyes." I thanked her, noting that she was wearing jeans and a casual top. I was perpetually overdressed for these dinners. Another sign of trying too hard that no one seemed to notice. We sat down to eat, and the conversation immediately centered on Zoe. Her promotion, her recent date with a new guy that hadn't gone well, her thoughts about maybe taking a photography class, her complaints about a difficult customer at the boutique. I ate quietly, offering appropriate responses when directly addressed, which wasn't often. The lasagna was good, but it sat heavily in my stomach, mixing with the anxiety that had become my constant companion. "So," my mother said during a rare lull in the conversation, "Natalie Reed has some news." Natalie Reed looked down at her plate, suddenly less animated. "It's not a big deal, Mother." "Of course it is, honey. Family helps family." My mother patted Natalie Reed's hand. Natalie Reed and Mark broke up. Mark was the boyfriend Natalie Reed had been living with for the past 8 months. This was the first I'd heard of any trouble between them. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "It's for the best," Natalie Reed shrugged. "But he's keeping the apartment since it's closer to his work, so I need to find a new condo." I felt a tingle of warning at the back of my neck. "Which brings us to the favor," my mother continued. "It will just be for a little while until Natalie Reed finds her own condo." My father joined in. "We were thinking since you have that spare bedroom in your apartment." They hadn't even asked it as a question. There was no spare bedroom in my one-bedroom apartment. Natalie Reed had visited once shortly after I moved in. Had she forgotten? Had they all forgotten? "We know it's an imposition." My mother continued, But family helps family, and it would just be for a month or two. A month or two? In an apartment I no longer had. With what money? The morning Elise Morgan moved out, she remembers the quiet drywall dust drifting onto her backpack. The musty gym towel pressed against her cheek as she lay in the cramped back seat of her car. Headlights blinked across her eyelids, illuminating the shadows of her new reality. The stale coffee scent lingered, mixing with the numb ache of exhaustion. Her father's old joke echoed in the silence. None of them noticed her absence. The world assumed she was fine. Each morning, the steering wheel felt cold against her palms as she rehearsed what she'd never tell them. At Friday night dinners, laughter filled the air, but Elise felt invisible. Her younger sibling, Natalie Reed, was the star of the show. "You look nice," Natalie Reed said, giving her a quick hug. Elise thanked her, feeling overdressed in a world that didn't see her. The conversation swirled around Natalie Reed's promotion, her recent breakup, and her plans for a photography class. Elise sat quietly, offering polite responses, her anxiety mixing with the heavy lasagna in her stomach. Then the moment came. "Natalie Reed has some news," their mother said, her voice bright. Natalie Reed looked down, suddenly less animated. "It's not a big deal, Mother." But it was. Natalie Reed needed a new condo after breaking up with Mark. Elise felt a tingle of warning at the back of her neck. "We were thinking, since you have that spare bedroom in your apartment," her father said, as if nothing had changed. Elise's heart raced. Spare bedroom? In her one-bedroom apartment? They hadn't even asked. "I haven't lived there for 6 weeks," she said, her voice steady. The laughter died instantly. 3 pairs of eyes stared at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" her father asked, brow furrowed. "I lost my job 6 weeks ago. I couldn't afford rent. I had to give up my apartment." Each word felt like a weight lifting, but her mother's voice trembled. "Where exactly have you been staying?" Silence stretched into eternity. Elise looked at their faces. Her father's confusion, her mother's dawning horror, Natalie Reed's uncomfortable shift. "My car," she finally said. "I've been living in my car for the past 6 weeks." Her mother gasped, hand flying to her chest. "That's ridiculous," her father said, voice gruff. "Why would you do that when you could have just come apartment?" Could she have? Not once in the past 10 years had they suggested this was still her apartment. Not once had they offered her the support they gave Natalie Reed. "That's not fair," her mother interjected. "We've always supported both of you equally." Elise laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even her. Equal support? Really? In that moment, the truth hung heavy in the air. Would they finally see her? Would they finally recognize her struggle? Or would she remain the invisible younger sibling, forever overshadowed by Natalie Reed's light? The tension crackled, and Elise knew this was just the beginning of her fight for self-respect and emotional recognition. "Equally, Mother, you paid Natalie Reed's rent until she was 26. You helped her with the down payment on her condo. You've bailed her out of credit card debt twice that I know of. Meanwhile, I worked through college, took out student loans that I'm still paying off, and have received exactly 0 financial help since I turned 18. "We helped you with college," my father protested weakly. "You paid for 1 semester of books. 1. I paid for everything else myself." My mother was crying now, tears streaking her makeup. "Why didn't you tell us you were in trouble? We would have helped. Would you? Or would you have lectured me about responsibility and proper planning? Would you have sighed and wondered aloud how I could have let this happen? Would you have told all your friends about how your responsible daughter turned out?" To be a disappointment, after all. Natalie Reed spoke up for the first time. "Elise Morgan, that's not fair. Mother and father love you." I turned to her. "This isn't about love, Natalie Reed. It's about expectations and double standards. It's about how I've been treated my entire life versus how you've been treated. It's about how they call you twice a day to check in, but didn't notice that I've been homeless for 6 weeks. 6 weeks? Natalie Reed, where do you think I've been showering? Where do you think I've been sleeping? How do you think it feels to come here every Sunday and listen to everyone talk about your promotion at a boutique when I lost a career? I spent 7 years building. We didn't know my father said his voice softer now. That's exactly the problem. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You didn't know because you've never been interested in my life beyond the surface level. You didn't know because it's always been easier to assume I'm fine, that I can handle everything while you focus all your attention and concern on Natalie Reed. That's not true. My mother sobbed. We've always been so proud of you. Proud of what, exactly? Can you name one accomplishment of mine from the past year? Can you tell me what my last big project at work was? Can you tell me who my friends are? What I do in my free time? Anything substantive about my life at all? The silence that followed was answer enough. Do you remember when I made honor roll every semester in high school? I continued, unable to stop now that the floodgates had opened. Natalie Reed brought apartment 1A and you took her out for ice cream to celebrate. I brought apartment straight A's and you said that's what we expect from you, Elise Morgan. My father shifted uncomfortably. We never meant to make you feel less important, but you did. Every time you dropped everything to attend Natalie Reed's school events, but told me you couldn't make mine because of work. Every time you spent hours helping Natalie Reed with homework, but told me I was smart enough to figure it out on my own. Every time you praised her for tiny achievements while taking mine for granted, memories flooded back sharp and painful. Remember my college graduation? You showed up an hour late because Natalie Reed had a minor fender bender that morning. She wasn't hurt. The car had a small dent, but that was more important than being on time to see me graduate. Summa cum laude. That's not what happened. My mother protested weakly. It is exactly what happened. Just like when I got my promotion 2 years ago and told you at Friday night dinner and you changed the subject to Natalie Reed's new haircut. Or when I ran that marathon last year and you forgot it was happening, even though I'd been talking about it for months. My father's face had grown increasingly red. You're exaggerating. We've always treated you both the same. Father, I have been sleeping in my car for 6 weeks. I've been coming here every Sunday and not one of you noticed anything was wrong. How is that treating us the same? You should have told us. He exploded, pounding his fist on the table, making the dishes rattle. How are we supposed to know if you didn't say anything? You've always been independent, always handled things yourself. We respected that about you. It wasn't respect, I said quietly. It was convenience. It was easier to assume I was fine than to actually pay attention and notice I wasn't. It was easier to focus all your energy on Natalie Reed because she demanded it, while I did what I was taught to do from childhood. Handle it myself and never complain. My mother was sobbing openly now. I can't believe you've been living in your car. My daughter homeless. What will people think? And there it was. Not concern for my well-being, but concern for appearances. How this would reflect on her. That's all you care about, isn't it? What people will think. Not the fact that I've been struggling. Not the fact that I've been alone through the hardest time in my life. Just how it makes you look. That's not what I meant. She backtracked. It's exactly what you meant. I stood up, grabbing my purse. I need some air. Don't you walk out of this house, young lady, my father commanded, his voice, sharp with authority that had worked on me for decades. But not tonight. I'm 32 years old, Father. I'm not a young lady. You can order around. And this stopped feeling like an apartment to me a long time ago. I walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back. In the driveway, I got into my car, my apartment, for the past 6 weeks, and finally let myself cry. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that I'd been holding back for so long. I cried for the little girl who had always tried so hard to be what her family elders wanted. I cried for the woman who had lost everything and been too proud to ask for help. I cried for the family dynamics that had brought us to this point. Through the windows of the house, I could see them still at the dining table, gesturing and talking animatedly. My mother was still crying. My father looked angry. Natalie Reed sat with her head down. They were probably talking about me, about my ingratitude, about how I had ruined a perfectly nice family dinner with my outburst. Or maybe, just maybe, they were finally seeing the truth. The week that followed was one of the hardest of my life. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my family, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What more was there to say? I had finally told them the truth, and their reactions had only confirmed what I'd always suspected. They didn't really know me at all. My mother's texts alternated between guilt trips. I cried all night thinking about you in that car and demands, "Call me right now, young lady." My father left gruff voicemails ordering me to stop this nonsense and come apartment. Natalie Reed's messages were gentler, asking if I was okay and where I was staying, but I couldn't respond to her either. Not yet. Meanwhile, my situation was getting worse. The emotional toll of the confrontation had affected my job search. I was too drained to put on a convincing facade during interviews. I started showing up late to virtual meetings because I'd overslept in my uncomfortable car. My appearance, which I'd maintained so carefully, began to slip as depression took hold. My funds were nearly depleted. I had less than $100 to my name, which needed to cover gas food and the gym membership that provided my only access to a shower. I started skipping meals, eating once a day from the dollar menu at fast food restaurants. I canceled streaming subscriptions that had been my only entertainment during long, lonely nights in the car. 10 days after the family dinner, a severe thunderstorm hit Minneapolis. I was parked in what I thought was a safe spot, but around 2 in the morning, I woke to water seeping into the car. The street had flooded and water was coming in through the door seals. In a panic, I started the engine and tried to move to higher ground, but it was too late. Water had reached the engine and the car sputtered and died. I grabbed my laptop phone and the folder containing my important documents and waded through knee-deep water to the sidewalk. I stood there in the pouring rain, watching as water filled my car, my apartment, taking with it most of my remaining possessions. My clothes, my toiletries, the family photos I'd kept, all ruined. I had nowhere to go, no one to call who wouldn't say I told you so. So I walked in the rain in the middle of the night. I walked until I found an all-night laundromat. I sat in a plastic chair soaking wet, clutching my laptop bag to my chest until morning. When the rain stopped, I returned to my car. It was a total loss. Water had risen to the seats, soaking everything. The insurance would cover the car eventually, but the process would take weeks, and they wouldn't cover the personal items lost. Not that insurance mattered at this point. The car had been paid off years ago, but any money from the claim would take time I didn't have. I spent that day in a daze moving between coffee shops and public libraries, trying to figure out what to do next. By evening, exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I found myself sitting on a bench in a small park. No plan, no shelter for the night. That's where Officer Bryant found me. She was doing her rounds, checking the park before closing time, when she spotted me still in damp clothes, staring blankly ahead. "Ma'am, the park closes at 9:02. You'll need to move along," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. I looked up at her, and something in my expression must have concerned her because her demeanor changed. "Are you all right? Do you need medical assistance?" I shook my head. "I'm fine. Just nowhere to go." She sat down beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. "How long have you been homeless?" The word hit me like a physical blow. Homeless. Despite living in my car for weeks, I had never fully applied that label to myself. I had been between apartments or in a temporary situation. But now, with no car, no shelter of any kind, the reality was unavoidable. "My car flooded last night," I said, my voice hollow. The identity I had built for myself, the capable, independent Elise Morgan who could handle anything, was a facade. Underneath was a wounded child still desperate for her family elder's attention and approval, still hurt by years of being taken for granted. The next morning, I met with a social worker named Diane. She helped me apply for emergency assistance, gave me information about job placement programs, and connected me with resources I hadn't known existed. "You're not the typical client we see here," she said carefully. "You have education, work experience, skills that are in demand. This is a temporary setback, not a life sentence." Her words were meant to be encouraging, but they made me think about the other women at the shelter. What made my homelessness temporary while theirs might be a life sentence? Was it just my privilege, my education, my past prosperity? The thought was humbling. Over the next few days I met some of those women. Maria, who had fled domestic violence with nothing but her children and the clothes on their backs. Tanya, whose mental illness had gone untreated until she lost her job, her apartment, and her support system. Eleanor, an elderly woman whose fixed income hadn't kept pace with rising rents. Their stories put my own situation into perspective. Yes, I had been treated unfairly by my family. Yes, I had faced bad luck and hardship, but I also had advantages. Many of these women had never had education, work experience, good health, no dependents. For the first time in my life, I truly understood the concept of privilege, not as an abstract idea, but as a tangible reality. And with that understanding came a sense of responsibility, not to handle it as I always had, but to accept help now so that someday I could offer help to others. My first night in a real bed after weeks in the car was a mixture of relief and profound sadness. Relief at the basic comfort at not having to stay alert for danger at being able to stretch out fully. Sadness at how far things had fallen, at the realization that I had no idea when or if I would have a condo of my own again. But as I drifted off to sleep, one thought provided a small measure of comfort. At least now I wasn't pretending anymore. For better or worse, the truth was out. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something better. 2 weeks into my stay at New Beginnings, I was sitting in the common area filling out job applications when Lucia approached me. "Elise Morgan, you have a visitor," she said. I looked up startled. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. My first thought was that it might be Officer Bryant checking in as she had done once before. But when I walked to the reception area, it was Natalie Reed who stood there looking uncertain and out of condo in her designer jeans and cashmere sweater. "How did you find me?" I asked, too surprised to manage a greeting. "I've been looking everywhere," she said. "I called hospitals, checked with the police. Finally, an officer named Bryant told me you might be here." She hesitated. "Can we talk? Maybe go for a coffee or something?" Part of me wanted to refuse to protect myself from more hurt. But there was something in her expression of vulnerability I rarely saw in my confident younger sibling that made me nod. We walked to a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the shelter. After ordering, we sat at a corner table, an awkward silence stretching between us. Mother and father don't know I'm here. Natalie Reed finally said they think I'm at work. "Why the secrecy?" She sighed. "Because I wanted to talk to you first without their drama. They've been a mess since that dinner. Mother cries all the time. Father's angry but won't admit he's really scared. They keep trying to figure out where you might be staying, but they're looking in all the wrong places, hotels, friends' houses, even extended stay motel. It never occurred to them that you might be in a shelter. It never occurred to me either until recently," I admitted. Elise Morgan felt the weight of unanswered questions hanging in the air. Her younger sibling, Natalie Reed, sat across the table, the dim light casting shadows on her delicate features. The rich aroma of coffee surrounded them, but the tension was thick enough to cut. Suddenly, Natalie Reed's phone buzzed, slicing through their silence. She glanced down, her expression shifting as if struck by lightning. "It's Father," she murmured, fumbling with her phone. Before Elise Morgan could ask what was happening, Natalie Reed opened the text, and she felt the atmosphere saturate with tension. "It's for you," Natalie Reed whispered, her voice trembling. As Elise Morgan read the message aloud, her heart raced. It was a rare accolade, a heartfelt message from their father filled with pride. Neither younger sibling had ever witnessed such warmth directed at Elise Morgan. "I've always admired you, Elise Morgan." The words echoed in Elise Morgan's mind, aching to break free of the restraints of unacknowledged emotions. Natalie Reed's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as the bitter taste of long-held resentment mingled with the unexpected validation in the air. "Why didn't you ever share this side of father with me?" Natalie Reed's voice was barely more than a whisper. "Why am I only seeing it now?" Elise Morgan replied, her voice shaking. Natalie Reed's vulnerability cracked through her polished facade. "I didn't realize how unbalanced everything was. I just thought, that's what family elders do." Elise Morgan's heart twisted. "For you, maybe. Not for me." Natalie Reed looked down, ashamed. "I never thought of you struggling alone. You seemed so capable." The realization hit Elise Morgan hard. The very strength she displayed had drawn a line between them. "You didn't see me fall apart." Natalie Reed leaned closer, urgency in her voice. "I've been looking for you every day, checking everywhere. I was worried." "Why now?" Elise Morgan felt incredulous. Natalie Reed winced, the emotional burden visible on her face. "Because I see you now. I feel terrible. About everything." As Elise Morgan shared the story of her flood-damaged car and shattered possessions, she realized this was the first genuine connection in years. Only then did they glimpse the deep cracks in their family narrative, laid bare by the absence of communication. "What's next for you?" Natalie Reed asked softly. "Keep looking for jobs and start over." As Elise Morgan spoke, the rain began to whisper against the window, echoing her hopes and fears. In that fleeting moment, they both understood. The possibility of healing lingered, waiting for the courage to reshape their story together. "I have a suggestion, but promise you won't immediately say no. Come stay with me." "What? You don't have a condo. You broke up with Mark, remember? That's what started this whole mess. I do have a condo. I never moved in with Mark. That was just something Mother and Father assumed, and I never corrected them." She looked embarrassed. "I've had my own apartment for 3 months. It's small, just a studio in Wicker Park, but the couch pulls out. You could stay until you get back on your feet." I stared at her, trying to process this information. "You lied about living with Mark." "Why?" "Because I was embarrassed. We dated for 8 months but never moved in together because he didn't want to commit. When we broke up, it was easier to let Mother and Father think we had been living together than admit the truth." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Apparently, dishonesty runs in the family." "I wasn't dishonest," I protested. "I just didn't tell them everything." "Neither did I." "That's kind of my point. We've both been playing roles in this family. You're the capable one who never needs help. I'm the fragile one who always needs rescuing. Neither is the whole truth." I considered her offer. Staying with Natalie Reed would be a step up from the shelter, but it also meant becoming vulnerable with someone I had always competed with, someone I wasn't sure I could trust. "I don't know, Natalie Reed. We've never been close. We might kill each other in a small space." Probably she agreed with surprising candor, but it would be better than a shelter, wouldn't it? And maybe it's time we got to know each other as adults, not just as the roles we were assigned as kids. Her words echoed my own recent realizations. We had both been playing parts in our family dynamic for so long, neither of us really knew who the other was beneath those roles. Mother and Father don't know about your apartment number, and they don't need to know you're staying with me either, not until you're ready to deal with them. The offer of space of time to heal before confronting my family elders was tempting. But pride, that old enemy, rose up again. "I don't want charity, Natalie Reed, not even from you. It's not charity, it's family." She reached across the table to touch my hand. "Real family, not the dysfunctional version we've been living with. Let me help you. Not because you need it, but because I want to. Because that's what sisters should do for each other." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Perhaps for the first time in years. Behind the perfect makeup and trendy clothes was a woman trying to make amends to build a bridge across years of inequity and distance. "Okay," I said finally, "but I'll contribute as soon as I can. And this is temporary." "Of course," she agreed quickly. "Totally temporary." That afternoon, I packed my few remaining possessions from the shelter, thanked Lucia and Diane for their help, and followed Natalie Reed to her apartment. It was indeed small, a converted loft space with high ceilings and exposed brick furnished with an eclectic mix of thrift store finds and a few expensive pieces. The promised pull-out couch looked reasonably comfortable. "Make yourself at apartment," Natalie Reed said, showing me where to put my things. "Bathroom's through there. Kitchen's basically just that counter with the microwave and mini fridge, but it works." As I settled in, Natalie Reed busied herself making tea, chattering nervously about her job at the boutique, her photography hobby, a documentary she'd watched recently. It was awkward, this new dynamic between us, but there was also something refreshing about it. Without our family elders as an audience, without the established patterns of our relationship, we were finding our way to a new kind of sisterhood. That evening, over takeout Thai food, Natalie Reed surprised me again. "I have a friend who works at Digital Edge Marketing," she said casually. "They're looking for someone with experience in campaign strategy. I mentioned you, and she said to send your resume directly to her." I nearly choked on my pad thigh. "You did what when?" "Last week, when I was looking for you, I figured you'd need a job, and Sarah's always complaining about how hard it is to find people with real experience." She shrugged as if it was no big deal. "I sent her your LinkedIn profile. Hope that's okay." It was more than okay. Digital Edge was a respected firm, smaller than my previous employer, but known for innovative campaigns and a positive work culture. It was exactly the kind of condo I had been trying to get an interview with. "Natalie Reed, I thank you. That's incredibly thoughtful." She smiled, a genuine smile without the competitive edge I was used to seeing. That's what sisters do, right? Look out for each other. As we ate and talked, I began to see glimpses of a Zoe I hadn't known existed. She was funny and insightful with a sharp eye for detail that served her well in both retail and photography. She spoke about her own struggles with our family elders' expectations, how the role of the fragile one had become a cage she didn't know how to escape. "They still treat me like I'm 16, she complained. "Father tried to talk me out of renewing my lease because he thinks living alone is too much responsibility for me. I'm 29, for God's sake. At least they care enough to worry," I countered. "It's not worry, it's control. They don't think I can make good decisions, so they try to make them for me. It's suffocating." I saw then that the preferential treatment I had resented came with its own price. Natalie Reed had been infantilized her independence, stunted by our family elders' constant intervention. While I had been forced to be too independent too soon, she had never been allowed to develop independence at all. We were both victims of our family elders' unbalanced approach, just in different ways. The realization didn't erase years of hurt, but it did help me see my younger sibling with new empathy. That night, as I lay on the pull-out couch, the soft rhythm of Natalie Reed's breathing drifted from the bed across our cramped apartment. A wave of something washed over me. Hope. Not just for a job or a condo to call my own, but for a real connection with my younger sibling, a bond that could heal the wounds we both carried. It wasn't a magic fix for everything. I still faced the daunting task of confronting our family elders. I had no job security, no apartment, but for the first time, I didn't feel utterly alone in this fight. And that flicker of connection felt like a turning point. The interview with Digital Edge? It was a game changer. Sarah, Natalie Reed's friend, turned out to be the creative director. She had the power to make things happen. When she saw my portfolio, her eyes lit up. 2 days later, I got the call. They offered me a job. The pay was a bit less than before, but the benefits? They were a lifesaver. Mental health coverage that I desperately needed after everything I'd been through. Living with Natalie Reed had its ups and downs. Her sleep schedule was all over the condo, And her housekeeping skills? Let's just say they left a lot to be desired. And yes, she still borrowed my clothes without asking. But there were golden moments, too. Late-night talks where we peeled back layers of our childhood, revealing truths we'd both buried. Movie marathons that turned into laughter-filled marathons. Cooking lessons where I taught her the basics our mother never bothered to share. We fell into a rhythm. I'd take the early shower, brew the coffee, and be out the door by 7:30. Natalie Reed. She rarely stirred before 9, working late shifts at the boutique. Evenings became our sacred time, where we'd share our days over whatever simple meal I managed to whip up or the takeout she brought apartment. With my first paycheck, I insisted on chipping in for rent and utilities. It felt good to contribute, to stand on my own 2 feet, even if just a little. But as I handed over my share, a thought nagged at me. Was I really stepping into independence, or was I just playing a part in a family drama that had been scripted long before I arrived? With the second, I opened a new savings account, determined never to be financially vulnerable again. By the 3rd month, I had enough set aside to start looking for my own condo, though I was in no rush. Despite our occasional friction, Natalie Reed and I had found a comfortable rhythm in our shared space. Throughout this time, our family elders continued to call and text. I responded minimally, letting them know I was safe, but giving no details about where I was staying or working. Natalie Reed maintained the charade that she knew nothing about my whereabouts, a deception that weighed on her more than I had expected. I hate lying to them, she confessed one evening. Mother called today crying, saying she's afraid you're living on the streets. It feels wrong not to tell her you're okay, that you're here. I am okay now, I acknowledged, but I wasn't for a long time and they never noticed. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine just to make them feel better. But as weeks turned into months, I began to see the toll our estrangement was taking, not just on our family elders, but on Natalie Reed as well. She was caught in the middle, keeping my secrets while witnessing our family elders' genuine distress. At Natalie Reed's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist using my new insurance. Dr. Reynolds specialized in family dynamics and helped me process not just the recent trauma of homelessness, but the deeper wounds of childhood. She didn't push me to reconcile with my family elders, but she did encourage me to consider what kind of relationship I wanted with them moving forward. Complete estrangement is an option, she said during one session, but it comes with its own cost. The question is whether that cost is worth the protection it provides. I thought about her words for days afterward. What did I want from my family elders? Not the unquestioning support they had given Natalie Reed. Certainly that time had passed, but perhaps something more honest. A relationship based on who we really were, not the roles we had been playing for decades. 2 months after moving in with Zoe, nearly 5 months after that fateful dinner, I decided it was time to face my family elders. Natalie Reed offered to be there, but I felt this was something I needed to do myself with the new strength I had found. I suggested meeting at a restaurant-neutral territory where no one could storm off to another room or fall back on familiar patterns tied to the family apartment. I chose a small Italian condo downtown, public enough to discourage dramatic scenes, but quiet enough for serious conversation. They arrived together, looking older than I remembered. My mother had lost weight, dark circles under her eyes despite careful makeup. My father's posture was less commanding, his shoulders slightly stooped. They spotted me at the corner table and rushed over my mother, reaching to embrace me before stopping herself, uncertain of my response. "Elise Morgan," she said, her voice breaking. "You look well." "I am well," I replied, gesturing for them to sit. "Thank you for coming." "Of course we came," my father said gruffly. "We've been worried sick. Where have you been staying?" "Natalie Reed swears she doesn't know, but we thought." "I'm not here to be interrogated," I interrupted. "I'm here to talk about our relationship and what happens next." My mother wiped away a tear. "We've been so worried all these months, not knowing if you were safe. I understand that you've been worried, but I need you to understand why I needed space." Why, I still do. We understand, my father said quickly. You were going through a hard time and we were insensitive. We should have noticed something was wrong. It was exactly the kind of pat response I had expected. Glossing over the deeper issues. This isn't just about the past few months. It's about a lifetime of imbalance in our family. It's about how you've treated Natalie Reed and me differently since we were children. That's not true. My mother protested automatically. It is true, and pretending otherwise won't help us move forward. I took a deep breath, centering myself as Dr. Reynolds had taught me. I prepared some things I need to say. I'd appreciate it if you would just listen without interrupting. They exchanged glances but nodded. For as long as I can remember, there have been two sets of expectations in our family. Natalie Reed was fragile and needed protection. I was strong and could handle anything. These weren't roles we chose. They were assigned to us and they shaped our entire lives. I went on to detail specific instances, patterns of behavior that had reinforced these roles year after year. The financial support given to Zoe but withheld from me. The emotional attention lavished on her while I was left to process feelings alone. The celebration of her minor achievements while my major ones were taken for granted. The result was that Natalie Reed never learned real independence. While I never learned to ask for help, both of us were harmed by this imbalance, just in different ways. My father started to speak, but my mother touched his arms, silencing him. When I lost my job and apartment, I was too ashamed to tell you because I knew based on a lifetime of experience that your response would be disappointment, not support. I felt I had failed at the one thing you expected of me, handling everything on my own. I described the weeks living in my car, the constant fear, the deepening depression, the humiliation of finally accepting help from strangers because I couldn't ask for it from family. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, though I know you do. I'm telling you because if we're going to have any relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on truth, not the comfortable fictions we've all been living with. By the time I finished, my mother was crying openly and my father's eyes were suspiciously bright. A long silence followed, broken only by the ambient sounds of the restaurant around us. Finally, my father spoke, his voice rougher than usual. I had no idea. None. He shook his head slowly. I always thought we were doing right by both of you, giving Natalie Reed the support she seemed to need, respecting your independence because that seemed to be what you wanted. I didn't want independence, I said quietly. I needed it because I wasn't given another option. Oh, Elise Morgan. My mother reached across the table, stopping short of touching my hand. I've been thinking about what you said at dinner that night, going over and over it in my mind about the honor roll and your graduation and all those other moments. You're right. We did take you for granted. We did expect more from you than from Natalie Reed. I don't know why we fell into that pattern, but we did. And I'm so sorry. Her apology seemed genuine, but I had heard her apologies before, usually followed by a quick return to old behaviors. I appreciate that, Mother. But what I need to know is whether anything will actually change because I can't go back to the way things were. What do you want from us? My father asked, direct as always. Honesty, recognition of who I really am, not who you've decided I am, respect for my boundaries, and most importantly, a willingness to examine your own behavior instead of getting defensive when I point out problems. My father nodded slowly. Those seem like reasonable requests. They're not requests, Father. They're requirements for me to have a relationship with you going forward. My directness startled him, but after a moment he nodded again. Fair enough. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Where are you living now? Are you safe? Do you have a job? The questions were predictable. Her way of trying to establish that I was okay so she could feel better. But for the first time I sensed genuine concern beneath the self-interest. I'm in a safe condo. I have a good job. That's all I'm comfortable sharing right now. But when will we see you again? She pressed. When can we talk more? I don't know yet. This conversation was a first step, not a resolution. I need time to process, and I need to see evidence that you're both willing to change how you relate to me." My father, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke with unexpected vulnerability. "I thought I was being a good father by treating you like an adult, by not hovering or interfering. I see now that I was just avoiding the harder parts of parenting." His voice cracked. "I failed you, Elise Morgan. Not just these past months, but for years, and I don't know if you can forgive that. But I hope someday you'll give me the chance to be the father you deserved." His admission, so unlike his usual stoic demeanor, caught me off guard. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. "I'd like that, Father, but it will take time." My mother reached for my hand again, and this time I let her take it. "Whatever you need, however long it takes, we'll wait. We'll do better. Just please don't disappear again." I made no promises, but I did agree to text them once a week to confirm I was okay. It wasn't the tearful reconciliation they might have hoped for, but it was honest. And for the first time in my relationship with my family elders, honesty felt more important than harmony. As I walked away from the restaurant that evening, I felt different, not healed, not whole, but perhaps on the way to becoming something new, something authentic. I had faced my family elders without either submitting to their narrative or attacking in anger. I had spoken my truth and set my boundaries. I had acted not from the script of the perfect daughter, but from the core of who I really was. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was just the beginning. 6 months after that dinner with my family elders, I moved into my own apartment. It was smaller than my previous condo in a less prestigious neighborhood, but it was mine paid for with my own hard-earned money from my new job. The day I signed the lease, I felt a sense of accomplishment deeper than any promotion or award I had ever received. Natalie Reed helped me move in, carrying boxes and arranging furniture with surprising enthusiasm. Our months as roommates had transformed our relationship from distant competitors to genuine friends. We still disagreed, still irritated each other at times, but there was a foundation of trust and understanding that had never existed before. "I'm going to miss having you around," she admitted as we collapsed onto my new couch after a day of moving. "Who's going to force me to clean the bathroom now?" I laughed. "You're an adult. Figure it out. See, that's exactly what I'll miss. Your tough love." But we both knew our relationship wouldn't end with my move. We had established a tradition of weekly younger sibling nights, alternating between our apartments, watching bad reality television, and talking about everything from work drama to childhood memories re-examined through adult perspectives. My relationship with my family elders was evolving more slowly. The weekly texts had expanded to occasional phone calls, carefully neutral at first, gradually becoming more meaningful. My mother was trying in her way to see me as I was, rather than as she had always defined me. My father was making efforts to engage with my life, asking questions about my work, and actually listening to the answers. 2 months ago, I had invited them to my new apartment for dinner. The first time I had seen them in person since our restaurant meeting. It was awkward with long silences and moments of tension, but also glimpses of something new. My father complimented my cooking without comparing it to Natalie Reed's. My mother asked about my job without immediately changing the subject to family gossip. Small steps, but significant ones. The biggest change, however, was within myself. Therapy had helped me recognize patterns I had internalized from childhood, the compulsive self-reliance, the inability to ask for help, the constant need to prove my competence. I was learning to be vulnerable, to reach out when I needed support, to set boundaries without guilt. My experience with homelessness had stripped away the identity I had constructed around career success and financial stability. In losing everything, I had been forced to confront who I was beneath those external markers of worth. The journey back from that rock bottom had taught me resilience, but also the value of community. I began volunteering at New Beginnings once a month, bringing donations and helping women create resumes or prepare for interviews. I saw Lucia and Diane, occasionally grateful for their role in my darkest moment. Officer Bryant and I had coffee once, an unexpected friendship born from her compassion on that rainy night. The shame I had felt about my period of homelessness gradually transformed into something else, a deep empathy for others in crisis, an understanding that circumstances can change for anyone, and a commitment to creating safety nets that I, by under, had lacked. My new job at Digital Edge was challenging but fulfilling. I had been promoted twice in 6 months, my experience and creativity valued in ways my previous employer had never recognized. The company culture encouraged work-life balance, a concept I was still learning to embrace after years of overwork. One unexpected outcome of my journey was finding community beyond family ties. I had joined a book club, made friends with neighbors in my building, reconnected with former colleagues. My world, which had once revolved entirely around work and obligatory family interactions, was expanding in ways that enriched and supported me. As for my family elders, I was learning to see them not as the all-powerful figures of childhood, but as flawed humans who had done their best with the tools they had. Their best hadn't been good enough, had caused real harm that couldn't be erased with apologies. Elise Morgan stood at the threshold of her new apartment, the smell of fresh paint mixing with the faint scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen. She wasn't sure if she was more nervous or excited. It was Friday night, and her family was coming over. The stakes felt high, shadows of old dynamics swirling just beneath the surface. Suddenly, a flashback hit her like a wave. The kitchen was awash in golden afternoon light, the air filled with the tang of simmering tomato sauce. She remembered the clatter of dinner plates, her mother's words slicing through the laughter. "Why can't you be more like Natalie Reed?" The cool linoleum chilled her bare feet, grounding her even as resentment burned inside. Those moments tangled love with suffocating expectations. All she ever wanted was to be seen for who she truly was. Fast forward. Dinner was underway, laughter mingling with underlying tension. Natalie Reed brought dessert, her sweet smile a stark contrast to Elise's quiet struggle for self-respect. Their family elders entered, a housewarming gift in hand, a set of cooking pots Elise had once mentioned wanting. They filled the space with talk, cracking jokes that brushed against familiarity. But Elise felt the familiar tug of old patterns. The comparisons, the dismissals, they were lurking just beneath. "Mother, I'm not trying to compete," Elise said, her voice steady but edged with vulnerability. It was a mixture of honesty and desperation to be freed from the sides of herself she hadn't volunteered for. As the evening unfolded, there were glimmers of connection amidst the tension. Conversations turned from customary to genuine. Her father, the stoic figure of her childhood, surprised her with a warm hug as they prepared to leave. "I'm proud of you, Elise, not for what you do, but for who you are." Those words shattered the weight of expectations, creating a tender space of acknowledgement. Alone that night, Elise reflected on her journey, from the weight of family expectations to moments that felt almost liberating. Living spaces once shadowed in obligation were transforming into places bursting with identity. She was building new bridges with her family, brick by brick, a reflective process, filled with setbacks and progress, but it was hers. She thought about the landscape of her life, how rock bottom could sculpt something beautiful if nurtured with intention. Families were not fixed, unchanging entities. They could evolve, adapt, and even thrive under the light of truth. From shame to acceptance, she was crafting a narrative that honored her struggles while embracing the possibilities ahead. Elise Morgan was learning that healing does not have to mean forgetting. Instead, it creates space for growth, understanding, and connection. Family, much like her favorite plants, could reach upward, stretching towards the light, no longer bound by shadows. This was her journey, and she was finally ready to embrace it. I am not the perfect daughter. I am not the capable one. I am not defined by my strengths or my failures. I am simply myself, complex and worthy exactly as I am, and that I have finally realized is enough. Have you ever had to completely rebuild a relationship with a family member? What helped you move forward? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. Remember that asking for help is not weakness, but one of the bravest things you can do. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some comfort to anyone facing their own struggles with family expectations. Music.